One of the real things about my resume is mostly that I'm real active in, at least in the States and as international as we can get from there, the major project controls organizations, AACE, PMI College of Scheduling. And, you know, I've added Planning Planet. I've been a member a long time, but added Planning Planet a couple of years ago after meeting James, and feel like that really this is the future of international project controls. So I'm real excited about being involved here. So today we're going to talk about the roadmap to world-class project controls. And it's interesting, James and I were looking at role delineations, and as we started, we realized that we had sort of originally delegated or relegated project management to one of the project controls functions. It's a minor function, and then we realized, well, it's probably not going to rest well with the rest of the world. But I'm a huge believer that project controls is where you really make things work. And so that's the key to a successful project. I have not seen a successful project that wasn't managed with good project controls. So that's the first step. And those you know, effective and valuable project controls comes from a structured approach to having a planning culture. My client base are contractors and owners, CMs, A&Es, and we work federal and private, government and private side. And generally what I've seen is the first major step in an organization in getting them onto a success path is getting their project controls culture in place, getting senior management to believe in it, and getting the people trained. It's nice to see a bit higher respect for project controls in the last couple of years, but that's what it takes to really get projects moving and get projects done correctly. And so those steps along the way require to adopt industry best practices. And there is no single best practice document out there that really covers everything. In the PMI College of Scheduling, we're working on one that we hope to have out first of the year. AACE, we're working on recommended practices. So there's a number of efforts going on, but there isn't a global industry best practices. And the ones, for instance, from PMI are written at such a high level that they're not very useful in terms of day-to-day practice. And then it's a question of personnel and how you recruit and, you know, train and monitor those personnel, and then maintaining the competencies you need at all levels. There has not been a well-defined career path in project controls disciplines. There's probably not even a great agreement in the industry on project controls and what that means. I mean, how many people in here believe that document control and contract admin is part of project controls? By hands. Yeah, I mean, a fair amount do. Some people don't. So it's one of those areas where we're sort of trying to define that, and we think with the guild and everything else, we're going to be able to be in that position to do that. It's not something that can be learned. You know, you can come out of engineering school and go out on the job site, and you might have had a couple CPM classes if you're lucky in school, but basically when you go out to the job site and start learning, it's hard to pick up the project control side. And you know, one of the weaknesses I've seen in the industry, at least in the States, is that so much of the industry was controlled by the academics. I have a good friend that teaches a graduate level class in scheduling and has his PhD in civil engineering, but he's actually never built a schedule, he's never worked on a job, he's never managed a schedule, he's never reviewed a schedule. So, you know, I like him, he's a smart guy. I question really how good of a job you can do in communicating what you do as a scheduler, as a planner. So that's an area where, you know, you don't see that resolved very easily. Most companies don't offer much in the way of training. That's my role at Alpha Corporation. You know, Alpha Corporation is a construction management engineering firm. We are top 100 PC, you know, program manager and construction manager, and we do specialized CM, big port facilities and that type of thing. But I don't see it in a lot of companies, and even some of my peers in the industry are operating off of a 10-year-old project controls manual that they've never changed, they never engage, they never go to conferences, they never see what the state of the art is. And so project controls gets left behind in most companies. it becomes obvious that people are desperate for the help. I mean, I don't know how many people in here are involved in forums and groups and, the online discussions where you could retire and spend your full-time work doing, but I see it a lot, and I see it in, the Middle East. We do some work over there. People are fairly desperate over there to get feedback, to get, to just get information and to get things that will make, hands-on type things that will make things better. Another place you can see it is, I know that when I do presentations, and I typically do about 4 conferences a year, anytime I put in a presentation abstract that I'm going to be providing a checklist, people go crazy. And I get, 40 emails after the conference or before it saying, can I get a copy of your checklist? And I wind up posting them on my profile, LinkedIn or something, but that's where people are looking for this hands-on, real practical application, and you don't see it. And so I think the international companies have started recognizing that that is a shortcoming. Now, if you look at, going to Wikipedia, and I know all the risks with Wikipedia because it's my opinion and everybody's opinion, but just in general, they do a reasonably decent job of sort of talking about the project controls area and the effort. If you look at the summary of that, it's really the element of the project that keeps it on track, on time, within budget. I mean, that does sort of summarize it. All the planning, all the monitoring, things that you do all result, that's the conclusion, that's the goal. They list a list of project controls needs, and I think most of them are pretty legitimate. The human resources is a tough one. That's the area in Planning Planet we're looking at the soft skills. How do you actually communicate with the PM and make sure that they're bought in and the things that have to happen that way. The one missing need for those of us that are in the construction side is the forensic analysis side. How many people in here are in construction, just broadly defined as construction? Okay. How many are in IT or software development, non-construction? Okay. You probably don't have claims, right? Do you ever get sued because you didn't get your programming done on time? No. Okay. So that helps define the difference. Now, when you look at construction management, the importance of project controls, there have been a number of studies, and not enough, but a few studies out there. Big toll road that was built in the state of Texas in the United States, where they did a study and recognized that one of the largest sources of cost growth was change orders. Steve Pinnell did a study in 2005 or 04 and published it in 2005. And as he looked at construction, the major causes of change are fairly consistent. Contractors surveyed came up with it. They also looked at where delays come from. And if you look at the list of delays, many of these lists of delays are a bit beyond the control of the contractor who's typically responsible for the schedule, responsible for keeping means and methods to make it work. Contractor responsible delay, if you look at this breakdown, the contractors see that 90% of the delays on a project come out of things that the owner either controls or third-party kind of force majeure, and only 10%, under 10% are contractor responsibility. When you look at the survey that the owners fill out, it's not that different. The categories are similar, but they still see 82% as owner caused, and maybe 18% that feel like the contractor is responsible for that. Now, obviously, when an activity is delayed, you're looking at productivity and things like that. But the goal in the survey was to determine what's the root cause behind the slow productivity. So, this survey and a couple others that I have, you basically find out that owners are in control of a big chunk of what causes delays on a project. So whoever's managing a schedule, whether it's a construction manager or a contractor, or we see a few times when owners are managing their own project schedules, it becomes really important that change management occurs. I have my issues with PMI and the PMBOK, as lots of people do. One of the good things that they have in the PMBOK is that every project has change, and it's important to make sure that you manage that change and you treat it as part of the process. This is a big failing that I see in the States. Maybe because we're the cowboys or something, but I see a lot of contractors that are really proud of the fact that they're sort of get-it-done type contractors, and they will do whatever it takes to work their way through and often ignore change. We handled about a $4 million museum for a contractor that was with the local city city who doesn't have a great reputation for cooperation. And I suggested to the contractor that we needed to do weekly updates, and we needed to do a pretty careful planning and and thorough analysis session. And we did, and we went into the pre-construction meeting with the schedule, and the owner said, "Great schedule, just wanted to let you know that I can't afford any change orders or time extensions. I have no time and no money extra." And I said, "It's kind of naive to enter into a project with no contingencies, isn't it?" And he said, "Well, whether it is or it isn't, I can't afford it." Well, the contractor went to work, and 7 days to the day that they broke ground, they were digging spread footings, and they dug up telephone poles and tree trunks. And it looked like somebody had dropped a bomb on the job site. And the project manager for the project called me up and said, "We ran into this big problem, but we're going to work all weekend, and I'm bringing in more people, and by Monday we'll be back on track." And I said, "Well, who's paying for that? And have you communicated at the owner? And do you have any idea whether it's really Monday or is it maybe Wednesday?" And so we ultimately sat down and modeled a little network, a little fragnet. So we did a little time impact analysis, determined it was a 12-day impact. He was nervous because the owner had been pretty tough about no changes, and so I went to the meeting with him, and the owner acted like an ass. He got jumped up and down, yelling, pounding on the table, saying, "I told you guys no changes, and here you are a week into the job." And we happened to be on a second floor old building looking down on the work site, and I walked him over to the window and looked down, and I said, "Do you really think the contractor should have planned for that? I mean, do you really think he should have planned for that in his original program?" And he said no, and he signed the change order. And I don't know if anybody in here does museums, but museums are nightmare projects because there's always a local architect, but there's always a museum architect in New York or Sweden or somewhere, and there's always a lighting consultant and a millwork consultant and an interior designer and all these artists that are in the project that aren't really done. I mean, they're not done. They're never going to be done. And so that particular project, we analyzed, I think, just under 40 time impact analyses. Problems that came up, requests for change in light fixtures, because a brand new light fixture came out, and of course we should always have the brand new light fixture if it came out. Every one of those, we did a time impact analysis, modeled it, did a change order, sat down with the owner, took our beating from the owner or the A&E, negotiated through it, got a prospective time extension in place, and moved on. At the end of the project, it went from $4 million to $5 million on a project with no contingencies. It went from 14 months to 18 and a half months. And we were doing a reflection at the contractor's office that I asked for to kind of talk about how it went, because I felt like it had been a good job. And I wanted to reinforce that lessons learned. And while we were in this reflection meeting, the owner of the contractor walks in with a letter from this owner's rep who'd said no changes. And the letter basically said, "Hands down, this is the most successful project I've ever been involved with in my life." And everybody was patting themselves on the back. And I said, what's the real lesson here? The lesson is you just did a project that was 25% over budget, 25% over time, and your owner's ecstatic. That's because you used the planning and scheduling as an opportunity to provide communication to the owner prospectively. And so as long as you're doing that, the owner has an opportunity to participate in their own mitigation of problems and everything else that it takes to get the project done. And if you don't do that, they're never happy. And if you had operated the way it looked like you were starting, where you just would have brought in the resources and done it and then fought it out later, I'd actually be making more money because you'd be paying me to do a construction claim. You'd be late, they would want liquidated damages, they'd hate you, you'd hate them, and everybody would be unhappy. As it is, everybody's happy because it was communicated. So change is vital, and every project has change, you need to manage it. Okay, now, what does a world-class project controls effort look like? I mean, that's the question. To me, first, it means you have to have a project controls-oriented culture. It's got to be the corporate culture on both ends to really make it successful. That means you embrace plan